there was just too much contraction going on. So, and then after that, the quietening of the mind works a lot better, surprisingly.
Oh, nice, man.
Much less contracting when creating those thoughts.
Yeah, it can get confusing sometimes. With all the information out there, especially the internet, now AI. That's why, even though it's not really a story, but one of the best stories I like is a lot of the monks who never learned to read, or the monks who were just given one instruction just to chant Bhutto or something like that. It's spelled Bu like DDHO, but in Thai they pronounce it Bhutto with like a T kind of, but it just means like Buddha really. But such a simple instruction, it kind of really smacks that ego away, you know? Like, what should I do? What should I do, abbot or Zen master or Buddhist leader or Dhamma leader? What should I do? It's like, just practice chanting. Chant whatever you want, but we recommend Bhutto, and do that for the rest of your life, and that'll be your only instruction. Can you imagine? Then you're just left with yourself. All the comments you have, all the inquiries, all the black and white issues, all the debating is just left for you and yourself to deal with. And that's kind of the point, you know? You see how valueless it all really is. Welcome everybody who's joining. We started the recording. Nobody's in charge here. We're just hanging out, talking about the Dhamma. Feel free to jump in or interrupt me. We're gonna accidentally interrupt each other. That's okay, because it's just the format, the nature of the beast, so to speak. So welcome. So does anybody have anything Dhamma related they'd like to discuss or have been thinking about, or any questions that they have for each other or whoever?
Yeah, I think a topic that comes to mind, and we're just kind of talking about more of an open awareness and sort of the balancing of right effort in terms of giving up and applying the mind, like giving up the unwholesome qualities, but then also knowing when to relax, right? Not to overexert, right? So the proper amount, in terms of that. I mean, that's something I from practice here, right, is definitely, from direct experience, it's like to be discerned, like kind of in the moment, right? Like not to have it's live, right? And so it's something to be kind of picked up at, actually taking that look and then making that change. Like, okay, are we slamming our foot down on the gas, like full throttle and crashing into like a pole, right? Or are we braking abruptly, right, on the highway, and now we just got hit in the back and there's a big pile up, right? So it's sort of like this balancing act, right? And that's sort of part of it, I think. And so, yeah, sometimes it's good, at least here it seems, to like, yeah, really just open up, right? And it's like, hey, the foundation has been laid, we can just enjoy and relax. And then other times it'll be like, okay, now it's time to apply that effort, right? So it just depends upon the context of the situation at hand, right?
Yeah, it's like you don't need to obsess about the example of walking into goose shit or dog shit. It's just as it arrives or as it arises, you step around it.
Yeah.
You don't have to bang your head against the wall thinking about it. It's just you're aware that you're in a park. You're aware that there's shit around you, aka dukkha. And it's not going to be around you all the time, but you're aware that it will be there once in a while throughout your day. And as it arises, we remember to look and change. You know? And it's all a lot of pity parties. Not pity in the positive sense, but pity in the poor me, victim mentality. And isn't that like dukkha itself is the pity party on all aspects. Whenever there's dissatisfaction in your mind, whenever there's friction, that's the pity party, right? It's like, poor me, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm fearful, I'm this. And at the center of that play of ignorance is the ego, always. Because I wish the world was this way and it's not. I wish things were different and they're not. I want power, I want to control things, but I'm struggling. And it all comes back to the I, me, my mind, the ego mind. Hi, dude.
Hello.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you too.
But yeah, we're just talking about pity parties in the negative sense, and how it's basically dukkha, and anything that you can imagine that comes into your mind of as not being good enough, wanting things to be a way that they're not. The star of that show is this fictitious ego that we give so much credit and value to, because we say, I wish things were different, they're not. I, me, my.
Mm-hmm.
Ownership, territory, And when you're silent, all that stuff goes away, You can argue with somebody, but it's not going to be anybody there. You're going to be arguing with yourself and see how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, silence is always a good place to go. Even when you think that you've found the most glorious and amazing explanation, the most profound sounding thing you could put into words, and then you're experiencing it, like that experience is just, dependent on that big, wonderful explanation that you've put together or somebody else has put together. And then, just like everything else that's put together, it falls apart. So, and then you're like, wait, what happened to all of that wonderful, great insight and feeling that I had?
Mm-hmm.
And you bring back those ideas, and you're like, oh, they don't do anything now. They have no effect, because ideas are just as unsatisfying as objects of the senses. The mind habituates itself. It's kind of the anicca of desire itself. Desire gets full on whatever it's feeding on, and then it wants something else, and that's the cycle that you just have to kind of get sick of, and set that down. And silence is always a great place to come back to, because when you sit down, there's still a little bit of momentum, but it dissolves. Depends on how much momentum there is. It eventually will dissolve, and you can start from scratch again.
That's right. Well said. Yeah. There's very little difference between getting a brand new Ferrari and some spiritual materialism aspect of the mind that you're clinging on to, no matter how noble it may seem. Even even when you whittle it down to its most basic components, don't hang on to them too tightly. And that's why there's a lot of talk about letting go in Dhamma practice, because it's very hard to break that spell of wanting to gain things and hang on to them. Like that one guy, I forget which monk, I don't know if it was Ajahn Sumedho or whoever. I think Ajahn Amaro was talking to Ajahn Sumedho and says like, oh, I had this great experience. There was rainbows and I was floating. He's like, great, another thing to let go of. And that's such a great teaching moment, because you're coming to your teacher with something positive, but there is a slight arrogance to it, isn't there? I had this experience. I may be better than 30% of people here now that I've had this experience. Don't you all wish you can have this experience? It's like, oh, great. You had that experience. Let it go. Great. You have this knowledge. Let it go. Sorry. Go ahead.
And then there's the definition of delusion is hanging out in the background there. So once you think you've got it, okay, so that it is something that's, you think it's permanent, you think it's going to be satisfying forever, and you think it's yours. You think you can hold it, and So the opposite of the three characteristics are what ignorance veils, right? So once you think you've got something that's permanently satisfying that you can hold on to, then you're back in delusion again. You're back in ignorance, and you're just like standing on shaky ground.
That's the phrase everybody uses, isn't it? Is, do you get it? Do you get it? I've got it. Do you get it? And it's like, there's not, like I said, there's nothing to get. It's letting go of these illusory concepts, letting go of this anicca, dukkha, anatta. It's very simple. It's not some hidden knowledge that only Dhammarato or only Ajahn Buddhadasa Bhikkhu has, you know. That's why Buddhadasa Bhikkhu stands out so much from a lot of the people I've learned about in Thailand and other places too, because he was so real world, you know. He was so like nibbana for everybody. And going beyond the robes. I mean, not many teachers can do it, you know. They may say that they're not clinging on to stuff, but how many teachers can you see out there? It's like, no, they still have that hierarchy in their head. And you can see it. It's easy to see. It's easy to see when anybody clings on to anything. For me, anyways.
Yeah, it's
because there's a struggle. Go ahead, buddy.
Go ahead and finish your point. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying because there's a struggle. It's easy to see struggle. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's like 10 suttas in the canon that I think people take to indicate a consciousness that becomes independent of the aggregates. You know, they call it consciousness without surface. But if you put that out of your head, I'm not gonna comment on whether or not that's true or not. But if you put that out of your head, you know, in like the Atiraga Sutta, where the Buddha talks about consciousness without surface, consciousness without a landing place, and he compares it to light that comes through a window, through an eastern window. Where does it land? It lands on the western wall. And then he says, if there's no wall there, what does it land on? And then the listener says it lands on the floor or the ground. And he says, if there's no ground, what does it land on? And he says, well, then it has no landing. And then he says, you know, in the same way, consciousness without surface, with nothing to land on, doesn't increase and hold. But you know, if you take the sort of a lot of people take that as, okay, then when consciousness becomes liberated from the aggregates, there's just this pure knowing that doesn't take up residence in anything. But you can actually just kind of see that in daily life, you know, like what you were just talking about, that there's always, like, as long as we're still caught in this idea that there's something permanent, something satisfying, something ownable, then that leaves a foundation for consciousness to land on, for grasping, essentially, right? So like, it's like, where's your bottom line? What's that one thing that you're holding on to that's underneath? You've let a bunch of stuff go, but there's like one thing that you're still holding on to. That's the wall, or that's the foundation for grasping to be able to take place. You know, for some people it's the tradition, you know, or it's whatever it may be. I can't think of good examples right now, but whatever that is that you're holding on to, that's the landing place, essentially, that the Buddha is talking about. And like Ajahn Chah says, whatever you're holding on to, that's what you have to let go of. That's the Dhamma.
That's right. You'd be surprised how many things come in a pretty package that you're not aware of, that you that are causing you dukkha. It could even be what you believe to be Dhamma practice itself. You know?
Yeah.
It can be very subtle. And just like a gun, you know, it's not Dhamma practice, it's bad. But utilizing the tool correctly, you know, the hand pointing to the moon correctly, then you can enjoy the fruits, you know. Not be caught in the spider web of the dukkha, wiggling around trying to get yourself out of it.
I'm just laughing because it's just the absurdity of it, you know, because, you know, we watch ourselves get caught in these things constantly. And then when you kind of talk about it, then you're looking at it and you're like, pretty funny.
It is. Yeah. It reminds me of Papaji, because Papaji was one of Ramana Maharshi's students. I don't know if anybody's familiar.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
H.W.L. Punja was his longer name, anyways. But he would always just revert back to the simplistic thing of, you know, just remain silent, and not just silent of words, but silent of the heart. You know, just gently observing. You know, and when there's no wall there, it's hard to bounce the tennis ball off of it. You take away that wall, because when you're ready to talk, when you're ready to figure things out, there comes that wall, the mind. But when you put it down, when you know it's like the game's over, there's nothing left to do. Can you be okay with that? Can you be okay in a room by yourself without thinking of a myriad of things that you have to do today, that you must do, or else all these bad or good things are going to happen? Can you let go of all that stuff? Can you sit silently? It's not about going to a retreat, sitting in the woods. Yes, that's very beneficial for a lot of people. And it's recommended, sure, for beginners especially. But it's not a necessity. You can do it anywhere, in a garage. And can you be calm? Can you be breathing and relaxing here and now, realizing that everything's okay, wherever you may be? That's the question. Can you be satisfied with that? And Buddhadasa Bhikkhu used to say, if you ever get bored, maybe it was Ajahn Chah, I forget, but he said, if you ever get bored, you know, practicing the Dhamma, it's always a fun activity, because the mind will never give you a shortage of of illusory dukkha bullshit to play with. You know,
Yeah.
it's always available. Go ahead,
Always
DJ.
Oh yeah, no, that's just it. That's, you know, what I've seen here is that, you know, you've always got that Dhamma game to play, to come back to, you know. And again, the thing is having that spirit of play with it, right? Like, not like this competitive thing that goes to conceit, because that just leads to dukkha, but just like, hey, you know, we can play this game at any point, you know, we're sweeping, you know, so even doing like mundane activities, we can do all those mundane activities joyfully and skillfully. And it's like, the thing is, too, we're still continuing to, you know, develop and cultivate these skills, right, too. So it's like, hey, you know, it's a beneficial thing all around, but we don't have to get super attached to these skills either, like, in terms of like, oh, I need to get this and really push super hard. We can come back to this is, you know, just this is enough right now, while also continuing to cultivate and develop like joyfully and skillfully, right? And so it's like, hey, that's nice. You know, it's just so wonderful, the Dhamma. It's just so grateful, you know, to come back to it and be like, wow, this really works, you know, in terms of freeing one from dissatisfaction, you know. And but it's like, hey, just keep coming back, and who knows how wonderful the fruits get, right? But again, as soon as when we try to objectify that fruit, when we try to be like, oh, this is this object, and I have all these thoughts about this object, as we were talking about before, right? It's like, then it becomes objectified, it becomes a solid thing, and then it disappears, right? Because it's not solid, it's all impermanent. You know, so that's the thing that has the longevity, is the Dhamma, right? But even then, the Buddha even goes and says, okay, it's like a raft, right? So when the time comes, you can put the raft down, right? You don't have to keep carrying it around. Yeah, but I think that's one thing too, is I know in one sutta he talks about like one fortunate attachment, right? So I think especially when folks are just starting out, like, you know, it can be good to still keep coming back to the Dhamma. It's just also see the pitfalls, you know, that come with certain attachments, right? To see them, right? So, yeah.
Beautiful.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, man. You said it. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
In just listening to this, it kind of has this really loosening, like the mind that wants to grasp, wants to know just loosening by itself. And it really feeling like all the words are just massaging it open. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, dude. That's a very nice way of putting that stuff. How about you, Paul? Any comments on that?
Actually, no, but I have another because so to me it appears that all of my actions are motivated from dukkha. So it is fundamentally always that whenever I want to do something, it's because I want something I don't have, and that's why I'm doing something. Like even if a glass of water, you know. And so for me now, the question is around what is like non-volitional living, as it's been once phrased, or what is the kind of way to make decisions, or how to act, not out of dukkha. Is there such a thing? They talked about spontaneous action. We've heard all of these terms, but what would that look like in your experience? I'm interested.
You're asking me or everybody?
Everybody.
Anybody want to answer his question?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's probably one of the most significant questions that comes up, and it kind of goes back to when Dhammadasa talked about breaking that spell, because all of us, we live our lives under this spell, but everything we do, and since you've noticed it, you've broken it to a certain degree. Like everything we do is in response to craving, right? Craving is this negative, just this feeling of discomfort or dissatisfaction or agitation that arises in our experience in order to pressure us to find relief for it. And some of it is necessary, like hunger arises as an uncomfortable feeling in the body so that we can nourish the body with food. Thirst is an uncomfortable feeling that arises so that we can give the body water when it needs it. We have the reproductive instinct so that we propagate our genes, essentially. It's actually an uncomfortable feeling, right? That we want to relieve. It's not a pleasant feeling, it's an uncomfortable
It's not
feeling.
Good. Why did you give us this, God?
The stupidity that the Buddha is pointing out is that we are heavily identified and in love with craving, right? So I've given this example before, but you sit on the couch, you feel perfectly content, and then you're like, I'm going to open my computer and look at some pictures of some naked girls so that I can make myself feel uncomfortable so that I can go relieve that discomfort. And the reason that we do that's just one example. That's pretty much everything we do in life, is finding ways to create dissatisfaction so that we can relieve that dissatisfaction. That's the whole samsaric experience of craving, right? Is creating dissatisfaction so we can relieve dissatisfaction, but it becomes a habit. So we do it mostly unconsciously. Sometimes we do it consciously, but mostly it's unconscious. And not seeing that process as horribly unsatisfying is part of our ignorance. It's probably the biggest part of our ignorance. So from that condition and that conditioning, which is all that is, just a bunch of classical conditioning, right? It's difficult to imagine, like, what would life be like without it? Like, what would you do if you were just like empty of dissatisfaction? If you were desireless, if you were aimless, if you were empty, these are three characteristics that are described for nibbana. It's aimless, it's empty, it's desireless, it's signless, meaning it has no reference to any meaning other than what it is, right? And so I guess until someone's completely desireless, it's hard to comment on that. But for one, like when the spell is first broken at the stage of stream entry, I guess you can say, nibbana is glimpsed. You experience a desireless, deathless, causeless state. That is like your first experience of true happiness. And from that desireless, deathless, unmanufactured place, unfabricated state, then you can see what I was just talking about, like how utterly absurd and pointless and meaningless and leading nowhere that normal way of living is, where we're just going from dissatisfaction to satisfaction, dissatisfaction to satisfaction, or dissatisfaction to relief of dissatisfaction. Let's say that's that sensual experience. So at that point, the Noble Eightfold Path is said to be what sort of governs your behavior. Mindfulness and wisdom, ethics, mindfulness, wisdom, is what guides your activities. The Buddha gives instructions on how to manage the requisites. It's like the training at that from stream entry through arahatship is like, how do they sometimes refer to as seika when in training, somebody who's gained stream entry but hasn't become liberated fully yet. They call that person like an in-between person, like a between two worlds type of person, because craving still comes up, but you see it for what it is. And so you have different tools you use to dictate your behavior, so it's not governed fully only by craving anymore. Like in Zen, for example, the reason they have so much ritual in their day is so that they're doing all the things that they're doing because like it's part of the structure of their religion, not because they want to do it. So like but what I like better is Buddhadasa. He always said duty is Dhamma, Dhamma is duty. So if we're responding selflessly to the things that we have a duty to do, then we're not only being pushed and pulled around by craving, right? Like, so usually like the things that we are duty bound to do, we resist it, or we turn it into some kind of identity, and then we sort of feed off the identity of it, like our jobs or our roles in life. But if you just see, if you can see them as Dhamma, So yeah, I mean, I guess. Sorry, my 1-year-old started crying, so I lost my train of thought. I don't know if you guys can hear her.
It's all good, dude.
He must be wanting something.
I'm gonna go and check on her. I'll be right back.
All right.
Yeah, so the idea is like I noticed that like some decisions that are possible to make are really like, what's best for me? And then I learned, okay, so first of all, me is a shifting, moving target. So I can't base it on what I'm thinking in this moment is best for me, because I'm not the same in the next moment. So that's already kind of irrelevant. And then what I've heard proposed was, okay, then we'll go into pure responsiveness, like kind of Michael was hinting at, okay, what duty? Then we just respond to whatever the duty appears to be in that moment. But even duty to me is conceptual. Like I'm saying, okay, it is my duty to do. So again, I have some concept around that. So when it comes to like big decisions, like move from this city to this city, or go into this relationship, or stop this relationship, or whatever, these kind of decisions, what am I going to base them on if not on a concept of a self?
Yeah, well, you have to use this idea of a self as it's meant to be used, as a tool.
Yeah.
You can't worship the tool like everybody else does like they say in the cult of Maya. It's just a tool. God gave you a brain, God gave you reason, logic. Use it. We're adults. Problems will come in the physical realm. We have to decide the best we can. But that's not the issue. The issue is, once you decide, can you let it go? Let the chips fall where they may. C'est la vie, la vie. Whatever will be, will be.
That I'm relatively good at. I have the difficulty before making the decision.
You gotta let that shit go, man. Just gotta try your best, do the best you can.
For me, letting it go. So for me, letting it go looks like this. If I let it go, then I don't make a decision, which makes its own decision, of course. I don't act. If I let it go, I just don't act.
Well, let's say you're in a kuti, you're in a little hut, and then you see that there's a hole in the ceiling and the water starts coming in. There's a myriad of things you can do. You know, should I just patch it up briefly with duct tape so then that gives me a couple days, maybe it won't storm? Can I put some more straw, maybe some mud? Maybe if I just move to this side of the shelter, I won't get wet. Yeah, there's a myriad of shit, but anybody with eyes can see. Just fix the fucking thing. I don't care how you do it, just fix it. If it needs to be fixed, fix it.
Well, in that example, it's clearly something's broken. But in the examples that are going through my mind, they're mostly conceptually broken. So I have some concept that something's not right, but that's based on all kinds of conditioning. So I don't know if it's not right. You know, I'm not sure, basically. Good old not sure.
Yeah, I think that's doubt and worry, you know. That's just all dukkha. If I don't patch it up properly, what will happen? You know, here comes the future. What will happen if I don't do this?
For me, it's more like I don't know if it's broken or if I'm just making it up that it's broken. You know, in the Kuti example, there's something obviously physically there that I can see is broken. But for me, what I consider broken is often conceptual, and so I don't know if I'm just making it up.
Do you have any examples?
Well, for example, if I have say that my relationship is not good, and I should change something, that I don't know if I'm making that up or if it's actually the case.
Probably making it up.
That's what I'm thinking. So then
it sounds like in this, not always, I'm not judging you or anything, but I'm saying in these particular instances you're talking about, it sounds like you're just overthinking it and being a worrywart for no reason.
Yeah.
So then my answer is like not act, you know.
Not acting is often a good choice, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
The point I was sort of like you know, going through a couple of like standard, I guess, examples, but the point I was trying to get to, actually talked about this on Monday with some other of our Sangha members, but this whole system, this body mind system, it works and functions a lot better without you there. It really does. Like, if you've ever experienced your own absence in this natural system here, and have just had enough time where you can watch it function without you, it works a lot better. It's strange to say. It's like, instead of this top-down management system coming from thoughts and beliefs and past experiences and rules and judgments, there's this sort of like intuitive energy that seems to just govern it when you're not interfering with it, and you can sort of trust that. And it's interrupted by craving. You know, craving is sort of afflicting the system. The Buddha calls it an affliction, like an illness or an infection. And the self that we normally identify ourselves as is like this layer of dead skin on the outer edge of consciousness, like after you get a sunburned and that skin starts to peel away, but like we're trying to like hold on to that and piece it back together. We're trying to manage and maintain it because like we think it's us. You know, it's like when Freud pointed out, you know, 2000 or so years after the Buddha, that the conscious ego is like on this very outer edge of the whole of the mind. And it's that little tiny thing that's really the last, it's really the last in line to know what's going on. You know what I mean? It's like the bottom of it's like the basement of the skyrise business. It's not the CEO, but it thinks it's in charge, and it's trying to manage these things. And no wonder it feels so helpless and frustrated, because, you know, they've done, like, let's say, like, have you ever heard of split brain experiments, where they somebody who has like untreatable epilepsy, they'll split their brain, they'll cut the cerebellum, and then they'll have two independent left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and they'll have this person sit in a chair, and they'll whisper a command into the left ear, which goes to the right brain, like go get a drink of water. And the left brain is completely, has no idea that command was sent to the right brain. So then the person will get up and go to get a drink of water and say, why are you getting a drink of water? But the left brain is what responds to language. So the left brain in that moment makes up an excuse. Like, oh, I was thirsty. And completely thinks I was thirsty, but they weren't, because like this like linguistic conscious self is actually just like a shadow of what is going on in all of this experience. And it's like sort of, you know, craving is what adheres us to this little tiny self. And actually there's many of them, and it's that's the real thing that's difficult to maintain. That's anicca. It's the real thing that's difficult to endure. It's dukkha. It's the real thing that we are not, you know. And so when the mind becomes disenchanted and dispassionate, that self, that level of self becomes pretty insignificant. And there's sort of like an intuitive knowing that takes over experience. And so it's like when religious people, you know, they put all their faith in God. They give all their wrath to God. They give all their judgment to God. They give all of their thinking to God. They give everything to God. And because they've used God as a way of letting everything go, they suddenly feel like grace take over their life. They feel like, you know, God comes into their life and takes over everything. And it's the same experience that we have in the Dhamma when we become so disenchanted to this false sense of self that we're trying to maintain, and we let go to such a degree that they're really just, you start to see things sort of like almost happening on their own, and you're like this sort of empty aware witness to it. I don't know how else to describe it, but sometimes you'll fall into it. Like, let's say you're talking to somebody and they're talking to you about the pain that they have in their lives, and usually you're trying to fix it and manage it, and you're trying to figure it out, blah blah. But every once in a while, maybe you click into like a wisdom part of yourself, and you feel this warmth come over your body, and you're just listening, and then you sort of know exactly what to say to make them feel better, or you know exactly what to do to make them feel better. You've sort of fallen out of thinking and that manager role in your life, and so without craving and without the you that is built by craving, things function a lot better. Anyway.
Does anybody else want to answer Paul's question or conundrum about
Can
not
I
being
just
sure?
ask a clarifying question? Paul, is this a like hypothetical example, or is this a real question that you've been having with yourself about should I move and is my relationship okay?
Well, to me, all questions sort of are hypothetical. I mean, it is real. It is real. I am questioning not so much whether the relationship is good or not, but I'm basically questioning my own way of behaving within the relationship, whether that's good or not, and whether I should make a change there. And that's basically the question that I have. And on the one hand,
but there is another person involved.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. If you feel like you're picking up on body language, thinking back because you were on autopilot, and like the other person involved, you know them to be the type to not say anything, you could just ask. And then you don't have to ponder. Then you know that you're fulfilling your obligations in this relationship, and she has set a precedent or they have set a precedent for like being the type to come to you with an issue as it arises, and they're not the type to hide that.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, ask her. Do I suck as a partner?
I'm sorry, this feels like it got super esoteric just a little bit. Not that I don't agree with the advice, like in theory.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess
That's really
along
good advice.
more esoteric lines, there's this idea, like in lots of traditions, and it's even carried through into like the latest like psychotherapy manuals, is ask the like about moving. Make sure that whatever you ask the question, should I move to X place? And eventually, like, the answer will come to you, whether, I guess, in your mind, or like Michael said, like, you could maybe feel it. Like, that's not unheard of if you read like people's journals or something. But like, eventually you would arrive at the right answer. But in a more like tangible sense, I can't believe I'm saying this, we got that at the esoteric, but Dhammarato makes a great point of like, you could probably be happy in the town that you like grew up in under X conditions, right? But if it's something like, oh, my hometown is homophobic, well, no, it's probably a good idea for you to like move. Like, if there is something in that other place that like would legitimately help like your body, right? Like better job opportunities to feed you with not increased expenses or something like that, then like those are things to be aware of, because you're not going to be a monk and decide to rip it all away from yourself to get to that like esoteric place all the time.
Whoa, that hasn't been decided yet.
Well, I mean, if you like your girlfriend enough, that's it. It's just not going to happen, which is okay. Because I don't know if you need to, I don't know. I'm going to shut up now because, like I said, that got really esoteric. I started questioning myself about why I'm here.
I enjoyed this.
You had good advice.
Yeah, very, very straightforward and direct. Actually, I was going a bit into what I was thinking too, which is like that remembering to look, right? And asking is almost part of that, like checking, like just take a look, right? See the environment, because we might have all these ideas, right, about it, and like, oh, this is what my partner thinks or whatever. But like, yeah, that like asking, you know, taking that look and seeing, hey, what's up, right? That's actually, yeah.
She answered that like a Zen master. Like, we're all like spitting Dhamma stuff at her, and then she's just like, well, maybe did you ask her? Like, are you a good partner? And it's like, oh yeah. That simple solution of communication.
Yeah, but also I enjoyed what you had to say, Michael. I thought it was, you know, on point too. Yeah, so I think that's the thing too, is like there's all like these different angles of coming to the same thing, and it's sort of like that's the thing, is coming to the context and like looking at reality, right? And then making that discernment from wisdom, right? And so that's the thing too, right? It's making the discernment from wisdom as opposed to like craving, right? Because I think craving would be, my partner tells me that they really don't like this thing, whatever, right? And it's like, oh no, but I need to go against that, right? And now get into a whole, you know, fight. Or maybe my partner is being really like abusive in the sense, like, yeah, we can perhaps tolerate a lot of stuff, but it's also wise to, you know, not necessarily be hanging around like people who are cruel and unwise like all the time, especially have the choice. So it might be the wiser thing to go, you know, actually break off. So it just depends, right? And also in terms of the physical aspect of moving, even if somebody is a monk, the Buddha advises people to avoid war zones, like he says, like in a very practical matter. So this is sort of the beauty too of the Dhamma, right? Because it's also this balance between like the more, you know, dealing with like reality and non-self and all these different aspects, and then also the practical matters, right? And it's like incorporating them both. Because at the end of the day, what is it about? Freedom from dissatisfaction, freedom from suffering, freedom from dukkha. And that's why I find it so beautiful as a guiding compass, because it doesn't get, it's like the middle way. It doesn't get trapped into this, you know, high-minded thing or into like absolutely just practical matters. It's extremely practical though. And I think it really does, with that simple dissatisfaction, the end of dissatisfaction, strike at like the heart of the matter, So, yeah. If anybody else
Very
has
good.
anything to add?
I've got one thing. I've got one thing to add. It's like, hello. Oh my gosh. What
Hello.
So cute.
What a fresh face. I had the experience of being married for 15 years and then being in another 11-year relationship. And the conversation was had then, like, what is it that you want? And then it was iterated what was wanted. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that then. And in that case, both of those relationships ultimately didn't function because there seemed to be something here that wanted other things. But I had gone completely with what the other party wanted. And this is part of my hesitation now to bring it up again, because I fear the compulsion of like, oh, well, I'll just do that then.
Mm-hmm.
Leave it at that.
Yeah, so then it's like that discernment from like wisdom, right? Also like on the other person's like behalf is like all the things that they want, like is it really coming from like sort of a wise place or a beneficial place, or is it like, well, you know what, I want to go on benders just drinking booze all the time or what have you. You know, the kind of like really sort of destructive stuff, right? That's not necessarily going to lead to peace and calm or facilitate that for, you know, themselves or, you know, you in that case. So it's just like, yeah, it's like that's sort of the thing. So I think, yeah, it's like that balance of not going completely necessarily along with everything just because your partner says it, but also like listening to, you know, what they want and making that discernment, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like the nature of relationships to be always kind of confusing and chaotic in a sense. You know, they don't have to be and they not always are, but generally speaking, relationships are a messy business. So anybody throughout their day can say that with any friendship, with any marriage, with whatever relationship. Anybody, you know, the idle hand is the devil's playground. If we're not relaxing in the breath here and now, any one of us are susceptible to this doubt and worry. Oh, is my relationship this? Is my relationship that? You know, any of us can do that. It's not just you that has this problem. Anybody can do this. You can do it with a relationship to a pet. You know, am I taking care of my dog good enough? Is he happy? He made a sad face the other day. We all can do this. But the truth, we have to come back to the truth that, you know, as long as you're not causing dukkha to yourself or others, you know, you can't really go wrong. You know, or if you're showing compassion to your partner, if you I don't know if you're older than me, but you're a grown man. I'm sure you have established your own morality, you know? So as long as you're following your own code of honor, your own code of conduct, and how could you go wrong? You know, we can't fix other people. We can't fix their mind. So all like Marcus Aurelius would say in Meditations, you know, other people are like the weather. We can't control them. We can only control ourselves. So if you think that you're doing okay, good enough, then that should be it. The matter should be solved. It's like if you had a house plant, you could lie to yourself all day and say, you know, I tried my best to do it. I don't know, but anybody with eyes can see, is your house plant wilting? Is it dying? Are the leaves falling off? Yeah, but and then the pity party comes in. Yeah, but I've been doing everything correctly. It's like we have to be honest with ourselves. Were you doing everything correctly in that relationship? Were you doing this? Were you watering that plant as it needed to be watered? Were you taking care of it, giving it enough sunlight? We have to be honest with ourselves. And we can make excuses all day long. Oh, well, I tried and this, and I don't know if I'm doing it correctly, and all this doubt and stuff. It's not very hard, you know. Treat people with kindness in a relationship. If you're not doing that, not treating them with kindness and respect, you know if you're not. You don't need somebody to tell you. You know? You don't even need them to tell you. Treat them with kindness, respect, and the rest is their problem. Then the relationship's good enough. You know?
Yeah, that's very, very good. That's very good in the sense that the enough and the not enough is this kind of cusp anyway with the dukkha. And so very often
Yeah.
the dukkha for me very often takes the form of not enough, even though it is enough.
Yeah, it's the whole Noble Eightfold Path. Remember, look, and change. Any person can take a glass that's half empty and pine and perish and say, "Oh, it's not. It's half empty. It's half empty." And then, following the Noble Eightfold Path, we say, "No, it really is half full. There's still water there." You know, it's your perception. You know, the holy alchemy of changing. All of us have relationships, and we can look at them and we can write books on how they're not working. But we can also say, you know, they're good enough. You know, they're good enough, and that's okay. That's fine. You know, if you find somebody who has the key to a perfect relationship, call me. Let me know, because it doesn't exist.
The one thing I was going to mention is that you know, I've been with my partner since 2003. We were 16 when we met, and I'm 38 now. And whether it's just your own experience, your own relationship to the world, your own relationship to yourself, or your relationship between two people, the teaching still applies in the same way, because it's always the affliction of craving and clinging and existence that causes the dukkha. So, you know, when two people meet and they fall in love, what often happens is that love turns into possessiveness, right? And the relationship becomes one of mutual feeding. You know, they're feeding off each other. That we generally, what the Buddha talks about feeding or fueling, it's what we generally call neediness. Sorry. It's what we generally call neediness. So a relationship that is wholesome in terms of understanding the Dhamma is one that doesn't, where the two people don't feed on each other. You know, each individual is sort of independently okay and doesn't need the other person for any type of like they don't need to feed off the other person. Of course, this is not going to be the case necessarily, right? Because it takes a person who's doing the training to break that sort of instinctive habit of feeding on each other. People feed on each other, right? They need to be around each other. They need somebody to commiserate with, and when they're in a bad state of mind, they want somebody to like feed that bad state of mind with them. And when they have ill will towards others, they want to gossip about it, you know. But yeah, it's just that craving, that clinging, and the existence part of it is that fixed that sense of fixedness or objectification. So we have a fixed idea of ourselves, and then we have a fixed idea of other people. And when you fall in love with a person, you fall in love with your image of them, essentially. And then when eventually them being dynamic and real, not something static and fixed and imagined, shows itself and starts to come into conflict with your fixed image of them, then there's more conflict. So it's relinquishing that craving and that clinging, that possessiveness, that fixed image, and expecting somebody to always like fit into what you think they should be, and expecting yourself to think what you should be. But if you've done well in the Dhamma and you've cultivated the virtues that the Buddha is talking about, like you know, patience, understanding, relinquishment, you know, things like that, and you're a generally happy, satisfied person, and you're with somebody who's not necessarily doing that, you know, it's not really your job necessarily to impose that on them. You know, it's your job to sort of, I guess, be open and responsive to them, because you're also not always going to be perfect, and they've, even without being exposed to the Dhamma, probably have been patient and responsive to you too, just naturally. But it's dynamic, it's changing. Anytime you try to like grab onto it and fix it and make it a static thing, you're going to suffer. So it's something that you can't possess. You can't possess another person. You can't possess your image of them. So that's the only thing I would add to that, is that the same wisdom of the Four Noble Truths and the dependent origination, it still functions pretty well in a long-term relationship.
And can you be okay not knowing if the relationship is how you wish? Can you be okay with that?
That's really what I'm working on. I mean, that's really what I'm working on.
Yeah.
Or rather better relaxing into. Yeah.
And it's not just the relationship in your example. It can be all types of things that we're unsure about.
No kidding.
Can we be okay? Can we be comfortable not knowing? And that's a big factor that causes a lot of dukkha, is we want control. We want to know. We want something that we don't have. Everybody wants to know the ins and outs of the relationship. Is it working? Everybody wants to control their environment. Everybody wants power. This reality is not set up that way. So we do the best we can, and we have to be comfortable not knowing sometimes. If you can be comfortable not knowing, it's wonderful. How about you, Alexander? Do you have any advice on relationships? Or Patrick, anybody?
I think that we touched on it a little bit also in our last call that Michael hosted as well. And I think one of the really wonderful aspects of correct practice is that it allows us to let others be just who they are in whatever moment we come into contact with them. And this is a really good thing because, I mean, just like stuff that shows up inside, whatever it's wanting to be okay just like it is. And so if we can really be okay with ourselves just like we are, then we can really show up for others, really give them the space and time that they deserve to express themselves just like they are in that moment, just how they need to be, to keep going, to be okay. If you can hold that with them by just being present, being okay with your own, little reactions, your own little thoughts about whatever's happening, just letting them come and go, then you can let that person come and go as well. And they don't have to sit there and try to fit your static molds anymore. They can be dynamic. They can be like life. They can live fully.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really beautiful thing when life cools off like that and we start to just let it go and let it do what it's always been doing anyways and stop trying to take what's not freely given. It's a really, really wonderful thing. And it's a really wonderful outcome of the practice is friendliness. It's a really great outcome of noble practice is friendliness, because if we're friendly with ourselves, it's no problem to be friendly with others. If we're compassionate with ourselves, it's no problem to be compassionate with others. It just happens naturally.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Same with equanimity and sympathetic joy. If we're joyful for ourselves, if we feel success for ourselves in our practice, it's so easy to feel success for other people, to celebrate their success. And with equanimity, if everything's just fine just the way it is, we don't have to get complicated how we talk about it. Everything is just fine, just the way it is. Yeah, same for other people. So when we let them be that way, we're really practicing at that point, because we're no longer projecting what we think should be out there and then getting mad when it's not. So we just let people come and go just like they are, because that's the coolest thing that you can do, is to just let things be just like they are.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
As long as we're with somebody who's not like filled with unwholesomeness, for lack of a better word, you know what I mean? Like, we can't just be okay with being with like an angry, abusive, dissatisfied, mean, judgmental, you know what I mean? Like, we're like
Buddha saying
Buddha
something like
there's
leave.
If you're with a person who's got good virtue, like the Buddha advises us to be surround ourselves with like wholesome, wise people. If you can have a partner who's like that and you're still dissatisfied, well then you got to look at your dissatisfaction.
Yeah, and it's about balance too. We can't swing too far one way or the other. And that's where God gave us a brain. We could see once they start hitting us and drinking alcohol and abusing us, then it's time to go. Just because we're Dhamma practitioners doesn't mean we have to be doormats. Like Dhammarato always said.
And that might be the kindest thing, not only for ourselves, but also for them, because, by like going, and tolerating this behavior, kind of setting that precedence. But when we say, oh no, actually, we can walk away from this situation, not from a place of ill will, but again, from that place of friendliness, we can walk away. Yeah. We can just be like, okay, cool.
pointing that
You can
out.
liberate yourself from that. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you could just calmly walk away from it's the same teaching, right? The reason people can't walk away from an abusive relationship is for the same reason that they're not happy with the good relationship. It's because of craving, clinging, existence, you know, that delusion, you know, it's the craving, the lust creates the delusion in that case. Like somebody who's abusive to you, you see them as trustworthy, you see them as beautiful, you see them as yours, when really, you know, if you can become dispassionate towards them, you'd be able to see them clearly as they really are, as like abusive and unhealthy to be around, and then you can just stand up and walk away from it, you know.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly. Yeah. And not coming from a place, right, like of resentment. Like I think in the Dhammapada, you know, the Buddha talks about, you know, they abuse me, they beat me, all this stuff, and for those who harbor, you know, this hatred, it won't cease. But from this place of friendliness, right, for you know, like it's kind of like a 360 panoramic friendliness. Yeah, just like you're saying, we can walk away because that's the kind thing to do in that situation. Yeah. Is
Yes.
they might not see it that way, but you know, it's just like, okay, you know, but at the same time too, right, this is the other very powerful aspect of the Dhamma, right, is those 8 worldly winds and praise and blame, right? So the folks in the world can say all kinds of things, and a lot of it can be quite ignorant a lot of the time. And so it's discerning wisdom to see, oh, okay, well, you know what? We don't need to listen to that because it's not coming from a place of wisdom. It's coming from a place of ignorance. And so we can step away from that. We can walk away also sometimes mentally from these things. That doesn't mean not coming back, taking a look and evaluating the situation, but sometimes things are just not worth the effort. So a relationship like that is not worth the effort for anybody.
Yeah. It's like when Dhammarato talks about, the Buddha says, if there's a war zone, you know, pick up your entire tribe and go move somewhere else, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, a relationship can be that war zone. You just leave, you just walk away from it.
Boogie on down the road.
Well,
Yeah,
my
but that's-
relationship, the war zone was always just only here. Yeah, never on the outside.
When craving, when the mind is intoxicated with craving, or just what the Buddha calls sensuality, is that there's always, I mean, we say it, right, the grass is always greener on the other side. For some people, it can be like, okay, I can go through my delusions, right? When I was a teenager, I didn't want to be in high school. I wanted to go live alone in the forest. And, you know, then my wife and I lived in Thailand. We moved back. I thought, oh, if I could only just go back to Thailand, you know, I would be like that happy again. And then I let go of Thailand and, you know, moved into up to the Pacific Northwest, bought a house. I was like, oh, but if my house is only deep in the woods and I can have a homestead, nothing but trees around me, no neighbors. Like there's always somewhere else that the mind can create that's like the exact right environment for you to be happy. That's just your own delusion. That's just your own dissatisfaction. Always created a new mental image for you to long for, to keep you from realizing the truth of this moment, that things are okay exactly as they are, you know, unless you're being abused or shot at. But yeah, generally speaking, it's okay.
That's part of the benefit of people entering into monkhood or nunhood too, is because they take those sankharas with them, and they say, well, I'm a monk, everything should be great now. And it's like, no, man, the suffering's just beginning. You're a monk now. You're not going to eat that much. You're going to sleep little. You're going to be walking barefoot. You're going to be alone, crazy isolation. And you think you got away from your wife and kids, but now you got an abbot. Now you got the jerk off at the dinner table or the brunch table, whatever they call it. And then you have the realization it's not much different from society. Is it? Because wherever you go, you have to take your mind with you. You know, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're single, whether you're this or that, you still got to take this old mind with you. So let's make it a nice place to live.
It's important to be in those conditions where all of the excuses you had are gone, you know, and you see that you've brought all your suffering with you, because, you know, I bring this up a lot and I always wonder if I should, but you know, that moment that none of us can escape, that we're all heading towards, is dying, you know. And what kind of mind is going to show up to be with you, you know, on your deathbed? You don't want a mind that is going to create a hell, you know, or you know, a confusion, longing, regret, you know, like we don't want to die that way. We want to die happy and satisfied. So you gotta practice that now, because ultimately, even if you have people you love with you, there's like a point where the senses fall apart. You know, your contact with the external world essentially ceases, and the last thing you have is just your mind. And so that's why that's a recollection the Buddha encourages us to have, because, you know, that's something that you can't avoid, you know. And so making the mind wholesome and peaceful and okay with seclusion and things like that, that's all preparation for what we all can't avoid, essentially. You know, like I said, I always think to myself, should I say this out loud? But yeah, it's a good recollection to have. Because wherever you go, there you are. You bring that mind with you, and want to make sure it's satisfied, happy mind, stable mind. You know.
Very good. Before we close, does anybody have anything they want to say or talk about? Especially anybody who hasn't had a chance. Now's your time. Everybody's doing good. All right. Well, guys, we've been going for an hour about, so we'll probably end it here. And pleasure seeing you all. Thank you so much for joining. You guys are awesome. And much peace and love.
Thank you, Dhammarato. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, dudes and dudettes and everybody.